So maybe the listeners are noticing that my voice sounds even more decrepit than usual,
rugged and sexy than usual.
Because I've gotten throat surgery. I went to Turkey and said, okay, I have a beautiful nose. I have a full head of hair, but I need to get some plastic surgery done on me. I've been making crazy money from Patreon. And they were like, okay, your voice and your accent sounds pretty decrepit, so let's give it a tune-up. But not jokes aside, like, I've been the biggest idiot of all time, and Hakeem is probably going to kill me. I've been having trouble with my throat for a few days now, like since last Wednesday, because I drank too many very cold drinks, sodas, waters, everything with a bunch of ice, even though it's freezing cold out here. And my throat got fucked up. And then instead of, the next coming few days stopping with it, I kept drinking very cold stuff. I kept smoking fucking cigarettes. I kept drinking alcohol. I kept eating the worst out of all of those, probably. Kept eating semichki, kept eating sunflower seeds, which are really harsh on your throat. And at one point yesterday, I literally talked like this. So for a whole day, I wanted to make sure that I do not talk at all, which was a perfect excuse not to talk to the girlfriend. Oh my God, I fucking had rested for a bit so that I actually have a voice on today's episode. So yeah, a little intro to why Hugo is sounding like the car Hugo.
It's okay.
That's something I haven't heard before. The cold drinks thing. Dr. Hakeem, can you weigh in on that? Is cold stuff bad for your throat?
No, not really.
Are you fucking kidding me? You have not. Every grandma of all time is like, you cannot drink cold things; it will destroy your throat. Wait. I'm sorry. Cultural shock right now, JT. You have never heard in your life that cold things fuck up your throat.
Bro, all of our stuff is cold here. If it doesn't come out of a fridge or a freezer or something, we don't take it. It's like, oh, this is room temperature. This isn't good.
But nobody ever said, yo, dude, you have a cold. Don't drink that cold thing.
No,
never heard.
No.
What the fuck? Okay, that's culture shock.
We have that
in
Iraq. We have that in Iraq. Don't worry. Arabs are also very specific about temperatures of beverages, but it's a common myth. Usually, the actual medical advice is drink whatever temperature stuff soothes your throat when it's feeling iffy. So, for example, sometimes when people get tonsillitis, for example, an actual recommendation is drink warm stuff if that helps you. Or for a lot of people, eating ice cream and cold stuff really makes them feel better. So that's something you can do as well. But yeah, I guess keep an eye. Look, I can promise you this: there will be long-term fucking throat damage from all the smoking you fucking do.
Don't smoke as much. Jesus Christ, you have to say it every fucking time. Oh,
okay,
you goddamn shisha motherfuckers! It's not all fucking 10 packs a day. It's only 5. I'm joking.
Dude.
Man, there's the healthiest fucking CrossFit going vegan meal eating motherfuckers that just die in a car crash or ice falls off of the rooftop of a building and kills them on the spot. I'm just saying that some motherfuckers will just like live for like 130 years, even while ingesting, I don't bloody know, fucking fentanyl into their eyes every morning. And some other people are gonna be the healthiest people ever, like, oh, straight edge, man. Oh, I pray every fucking morning for 3 hours, and then I meditate for 4 hours, and I don't even work, and I only drink water, and they just pass out dead in the dry cleaners when they're 32. So it's you never know.
You heard it from Ugopnik. Keep smoking, drink a lot, and you'll live to 130.
Exactly right.
No, the only thing I'm saying is, if you do not do all of those things, do not expect to live until 130. You see, that's the spin.
Hello, everybody. This is the Deprogram, and today we're going to be talking about everybody's, favorite femboy tradition, fascism. I say that as a joke, but for some reason, every time on Twitter I see somebody who unironically has a fascist on the thing, they always have femboy stuff. I don't get it. Somebody explain it to me. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, there's something wrong with being a fascist. Femboy, not so much, but yeah. Okay.
No, there is a theory. There is a specific theory, because fascism is obsessed with hierarchy. At some point, when everybody else is eliminated, the last fascist war will have to be between men and women. So a true fascist understands that all women must be exterminated, and therefore a true fascist relationship is only between an alpha male and a beta male. You know, between a femboy and an alpha giga Aryan Chad. Therefore, true fascists are pro-femboy because they understand that is the only person they can date without being hypocrites as fascists. Great way to start and confuse the shit out of everyone in the beginning. Absolutely fucking lovely.
Fascist theory. I was just gonna say, by the way, this reminds me of the fucking. There's a copy pasta about that exact same topic, where there's a guy who's like, "Oh, sometimes I like to imagine myself as a Polish twink and some Aryan German chat," and he has. It's people definitely know what the fuck I'm talking about. But yeah, okay, let's actually get to the fucking definition. All right, so our stupidity aside, fascism is a very broad concept, and it has different definitions depending on different periods, but the general trends are the same. So I can define it along those lines. When you look at, for example, the Italians and what they said about fascism, they defined it in very loose terms, one of which, within the, I guess, very first work of fascism written, which was incorrectly attributed to Mussolini, it is written that fascism is emerging of corporate and state power. But I personally think this is an incomplete definition, because the United States is emerging of state and corporate power, and they're not fascist. I mean, that's a bit debatable. I'm kidding. But yeah, it's not exactly a complete definition. Another definition as well that I would like to bring to mind is one that Lenin popularized, which is that fascism is a capitalism in decline. That doesn't mean, by the way, that every time capitalism begins to decline or is in decline, it will become fascism, but that it trends towards that. This is a noticeable pattern that we can see.
So less variety of Coca-Cola does not mean fascism.
Basically.
Or sometimes it does. Yes.
Sounds like something a tanky would say. Okay, sorry. Sorry. So basically, merging those
actual existing Coca-Cola socialism. I'm sorry.
No, it's true. I was gonna say, so the two definitions, merger of corporate and state power and capitalism decline, can be kind of loosely brought together. And then we set conditions, and those conditions, like the characterization of fascism, is listed as such. The very first trend and pattern, idea, however you want to put it, the very first thing that happens under fascism and as a characteristic trait is the extreme suppression of workers' movements and communists. Yeah, this happens across the board. We're the first people they come after. I wonder why. I wonder why they don't touch the liberals. I wonder. Fucking, we'll get into that. But yeah, it's so number one, extreme suppression of workers' movements and communists. Number two, militarism, be it the Prussian cringe shit that the Germans were on, or this fucking neo-Roman masturbation that the Italians would do, or whatever the fucking Spanish would do. Fucking hell, they'd look at Portugal from afar. I don't know what the fuck. A bunch of failed offensives in North Africa, and then fuck. But yeah, so depending on different points in history, you have differing examples of militarism. There's extreme nationalism, hyper-nationalism, Croatian nationalism with the Ustase, for example, which Jukopnik is going to talk her ear off, hopefully, about this. As an example, be German, Italian, whatever the fuck. After this, there's expansionism, either by aspiration, as like we said again with Spain and how it couldn't fucking do anything, or by action, like how the Nazis managed, or how the Italians hoped to go into Greece and then fucking 2,000 people with broken rifles kind of basically pushed them back. But yeah, so that's another one, expansionism. Also racism, but this one is a very... it depends, right? The Nazis were very racist. Oh, fucking the liberal will be like, what aboutism? Fucking eat my dick, all right? Yeah.
I love when Hakim argues with himself. It's like one of the key tenets of the podcast. He talks and just interrupts himself. Because, like, you know that meme, like, is the tanky with us in the room or is the fascist with us in the room? It's like for Hakim, like, is the liberal in the room right now? Because apparently he is all the time.
Fuck, it's in my head. I'm schizophrenic, I swear. I hear the fucking voices in my head.
Hakim just talking to a random girl on a date. Oh, so what's your favorite color? And she's like, oh, red. And he's like, oh, mine's blue. But oh, what yellow is also better? I'm sorry. I gotta talk to the yellow person sitting next to me. Hakim, nobody is sitting next to us. No, it is. Trust me.
You know, as you say this, I remember I met this person, and we were basically on a very long bus ride somewhere, and she happened to basically be more on the anarchist side of things, but was like interested for a discussion, and she opened the discussion. It was not me, okay? But for the next 4 hours, I was like, okay. We just had the conversation. We just had the conversation about, you know, socialism, anarchism, the relevant histories, and blah, blah, blah. At the end of which, though, she was actually, you know, she was credit where credit is due. Is that what you fucking Americans say? Is it credit where credit is due? Okay. Fucking credit where credit is behind. I don't fucking know what you guys say. Anyways, yeah. Yeah, credit to her. She was actually very open and actually gave me quite a few things to think about from her perspective. And then we hung out a couple of times and we discussed about this shit. And this is something that's nice. You can't do this with liberals usually, because then they're just gonna fucking throw out a truism or some bullshit, and then they're just gonna close their ears and be like, "But what about Stalin?"
Also Hakim not a virgin confirmed, so very good. We talked a few more times. Yeah.
They exchanged books.
Okay. Yeah.
He showed her his capital.
Okay, copy. Anyways, so what did we list so far? Yeah, suppression workers movement.
It was not surprising to see that Hakim did not have a falling rate of profit. Okay, I'll stop now.
I mean, especially when it comes to you, I don't have a falling rate of profit. It's supremely rising. Speaking of expansionism, when I see you Kopnik, there's expansionism. Anyways, then we mentioned racism in the various examples. The Italians were kind of less so; they're more forced by the Germans, but it is a trend that we do see. Class collaborationism, which is a point that we'll build up on as well, which means basically the idea that the proletariat and bourgeoisie, the two dominant classes of society, aren't against each other. They don't have a contradiction in interests. In fact, it should be the whole nation against the fucking Poles and Jews and fucking I don't know. And then finally, the most important thing. Include the cough. Most important thing, the supreme protection and position of capital, meaning that no matter what, property is protected above all else. That's a very stupidly long definition, but I hope it's concise. You guys can take it away from me.
Now that was good. There's one I want to throw out because I'm working on a series about fascism with a very, bless his heart, very old, very, very liberal academic who's written a bunch of books on the subject. And here's his definition. I'm curious to hear your perspectives on this. So he defines it as palingenetic ultranationalism, which is just fancy people words. Palingenetic meaning a belief in the violent rebirth of the nation from the ashes of a decaying, decadent present and a return to some glorious mythologized past. And ultranationalist obviously meaning an overwhelming loyalty to one's country to the point where it's not my country is great, but rather that all other countries are inferior. And this obviously also comes packaged with regressive views on race, gender roles, sexuality, and a laundry list of things that they considered perversions. So I think that's, I think it hits on a lot of the main points, and obviously it depends on the country in which fascism rears its ugly head on the national peculiarities and how they kind of add flavor to the basic fascist mixture. But what do you guys think about that? It's missing, I think, some of the core Marxist bits.
It is.
It's a very liberal definition.
Yeah, and especially we need to remember that while fascism is linked to so-called conservative values and going back to the roots, etc., that is usually only used as a rhetoric for the creation of a new idea, a new ideal of what the now under the fascist banner the country is supposed to look like. And we can see that both with the Italians and with the Germans, where after the introduction of fascism as the main state doctrine, they did not go back to a feudal way of life or purely traditionalist family gatherings where they sit and eat, etc., etc. In Germany especially, a whole new set of aesthetics, of behaviors, of acceptable versus non-acceptable behavior was created. So while yes, the rhetoric is very often to the so-called rebirth of the nation and returning to the times of old, that rhetoric very often, just like most other things in the fascist rhetoric, tend to be put aside for the needs of the top of the hierarchy, which at the end of the day is ruling a set fascist state. So that's like one that I would just comment on lightly and touch. And the other one is the ultranationalism, which, yes, very often leads to regressive views on X, Y, and Z. And for a fascist movement, usually you absolutely do need an enemy to unite against. That's one of the principal ways to unify anyone under this sort of emotional fervor that fascism tries to sell you on. But we will see in the future that it is not always, especially as the political climate changes, it is not always only going to be talking about race, ethnicity, etc., etc. The fascist dogma can ingest itself into pretty much anything and spin any story in its own, for its own use. Like, for example, the way French fascists on elections very often say we need to limit the immigration of people from more conservative countries, and these are fascists saying it, Le Pen's party specifically, because, for example, they will hurt our LGBTQ population at home. So you see fascists using gay people at home in order to propagate fascist dogma. All I'm trying to say for the viewership to remember is that it is not always ultranationalist. It is not always specifically racist. It will find different ways to sell you on its ideas. And it doesn't really have genuine principles that it holds to that you can always show, like, it's right there. And that's important to know, because we will be seeing fascist movements that sound very much like liberals and very often are ex-liberals, or as Marxists like to say, there's not really a difference between the two very often. But just keep an eye out, and hopefully this episode and future episodes will help you understand that it is a fascist is not just the guy with the swastika on his hand or the guy that is racist. To never underestimate the enemy. They might be insane, but they're not stupid.
Yeah,
that's a very, very good
summary.
point, I think. Well, of course, I also want to mention about the superstructure aspect, where, they have different, what is considered socially acceptable or not, and how, like, roles are rearranged or at least perceived and all that. A nice summary of that is, imagine the Happy Meal toys, but they're pink and blue. And put the black and white filter and be like, this is what they took away from you, white man. So stupid. No, I'm just saying, like, the gendered shit as well, to build up on that. The aspect or the idea, for example, the woman's role is in the home while the man is the fucking protector and blah, 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 and how that was a core historical aspect of fascism might also be turned, I guess, inwards, or I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but basically also appeased into some weird liberal fold where they try to, increase the role of women in the fascist discourse or fascist project. And we see this kind of funnily reflected in the conservative boom that happened in like 2015 or whatever the fuck on YouTube, and you see all these garbage channels, and all these conservative women would complain about why are conservative sphere so anti-women, and they're like core members of this stupid online movement. And I think fascism would also encounter the same thing, where they would try to push them when it's useful politically. For example, same with like LGBTQ people, and then they're just gonna not when otherwise. But very, very good point.
Yeah,
sorry.
Depending on who is at the top of the hierarchy, as we'll talk later, just how hyper-hierarchical fascism is at the end of the day. But depending who at the top is, once it is established, that's the quote-unquote group that it's never going to be discriminated against. But slowly, as fascism develops and at some point naturally decays, more and more groups are not going to be considered in groups, but are going to be considered out groups. But never ever the ones that are on top. So if it's a female Führer, there's not going to be a lot of rhetoric about sexism. But the second the new Führer needs to come in, they will start talking about it. So it's always to protect the interests of the top strata. And if they happen to be German, then Germans. If they happen to be fucking, I don't know, Sri Lankan, then Sri Lankan.
Yeah. And I think a nice point also linked to this is you mentioned common interests, but there's one common interest between if both the Sri Lankan example, whatever, and German fascists, which is they serve the same class interests. Yes. And that's kind of the fundamental idea with fascism, is that the difference really between bourgeois democracy and fascism, of course, bourgeois democracy has a certain veneer of civil liberties. Oh, you can go and vote. You can have a fucking newspaper that, not really. You don't really have freedom of the press, but at least the idea is kind of somewhat there. No one's going to really bother you too much if you're speaking out against the government, of course, unless you reach an audience like certain members of this podcast. Then you might get a nasty visitor too. But otherwise, you have a veneer of civil liberties, of course. But these different spectrums of freedom, where on like bourgeois democracies on the level of, let's say, Switzerland has quite a decent amount of it because capital is fairly secure. It doesn't feel the need to suppress and curb voters' rights or people's right to assembly or the quote-unquote freedom to the press, because so far capitalism is wholly secure. Property rights are protected. Nothing will threaten them. So there's no need to kind of clamp down on this stuff. But the second a true threat does arise, then we start seeing this slow I don't want to say disintegration, but slow descent, that's the word in English. A slow descent into what can be considered to be more fascistic, because then the capitalist class begins to feel threatened, and with capital threatened, the ruling class, of course, weighs the pros and cons of the fascistic violence. And whether it's Social Democrats in Weimar Germany, or even Republicans, Democrats, whatever the fuck in the US, or wherever else, they begin to see, hey, maybe, having fascist gangs roaming the fucking streets wouldn't be too bad. And then that continues the descent.
Absolutely. That's, in my opinion, that's the most important thing that needs to be noted when it comes to the conversation about fascism, because there's a reason that most left-leaning and anarchists and communists alike like to refer to fascists as reactionaries. Fascism is born out of the reaction of large capital against potential threats towards it. And that is why, ironically, it tends to rise when it is threatened the most. It is not something that is born out of the status quo, something that is born out of capitalism existing as it is. But as we know, capitalism always leads to repeated crises, and the more crises it endures, the more it rots from the inside. The larger argument, ironically, both socialists and fascists have for its overthrow. And that is why the fascist is the reactionary force which does not want to engage in the actual analysis of the economy, an actual analysis of how class works, an actual analysis of what is leading to, for example, our planet burning down. But it looks to answer those same questions that the majority of the population have in times of crises with its own spin, which always, interestingly enough, stays away from addressing the class problem. And that is why it is the absolute dichotomy to socialist thought, even though, ironically, in my humble opinion, capitalism is still the primary, I'll ask because it's far more powerful ideological enemy to Marxists, but that does not mean that the fascist movement or fascist thought and philosophy in general, if you can call that the drivel philosophy of just fucking reacting to things and being like, it's because of that dude, because it looks different than me at the end of the day. But it is, again, what Hakeem noted is very important, because it is born out of basically capitalism being an insecure bitch and calling up other insecure motherfuckers to mess with a potential progressive uprising.
Sorry, I don't know why, but sometimes I'm reminded of, like, in the pursuit to analyze fascism, there's a lot of like weird like stuff out there. And I remember there was this thing that I read a long time ago which tried to correlate male impotence to like fascistic tendencies, and I was like, okay, fine, whatever, like human curiosity and whatever, but this is not a way you should go about like carrying out serious analysis. It's not because the guy can't get it up that he's a fascist. I mean, maybe it plays some role, all right? Maybe a Jewish girl said no to him once, and then he was like, oh, fucking maybe. But I think it's a little deeper than this. That's why I don't like this stuff, and or the idea of, oh, there's an authoritarian personality, like all this sort of, you know, predestination nonsense for ideology. Just like nobody is predestined to be a communist, nobody's predestined to be a fascist either. Or even a liberal for that matter. It's what your material conditions make of you. But yeah, sorry, it's just a thing that I find funny. Because you mentioned, like, oh, if you can call that shit drivel, please, okay. Evola did shrooms and imagine this fucking mother getting fucked by a tiger or something. Like, oh, this is the renewal of the nation. What the fuck? Jesus Christ. Yeah. Don't ever bother reading fascist garbage, because it's just it's a mixture of bad writing, a lot of basically either racism or like this group that I don't really know too much about, but this guy really doesn't like them for some reason. Like Albanians, they just start talking shit. Some of the Italian fascists, no, really, they talk the way they speak about fucking Albanians, and I'm like, okay, all right, fine.
And then they were allies after
and then
that.
Yeah,
super
mixed
fucking weird.
Yeah, and then of course mixed with weird sexual archetypes or like it's a waste of fucking time. Don't bother. But yeah, what was I going to say? Yeah, this, I think, also leads into something that you hear a lot, which is the, scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds, which I think is a bit more tongue-in-cheek, really, because it doesn't mean that every liberal is a fascist. No, there are some, quote-unquote, principled liberals that are even against fascism, but impotently. They very rarely are actually, you know, pro-action or proactive against fascism, but they will, you know, spend their entire time making wild... not declamations, what the fuck, not declarations, denunciation, is that the
denunciation, yeah.
Denunciations of fascism, but they won't actually do anything material about it. But when we as Marxists, for example, when we say scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds, it's because whenever capital has been threatened historically as well as nowadays, liberals will immediately side with the far right over the left, and this has happened on every single example in history. Not one have liberals been like, you know what, we're going to go and join a coalition government with the communists because we don't want the fascists to win. This has never fucking happened. The exact opposite has happened, actually. The liberals have every single time either sided with fascists, empowered them, or stood by powerlessly and basically ignored them and didn't do anything about it, even when they had the power to possibly change some shit. So that's kind of what we say. And on the other hand, we also have those very same liberals on the other side of the spectrum that whenever there is a socialist revolution that takes place, those liberals that would have done nothing as fascists will start screaming, and to quote Parenti, are there civil liberties for the fascists? And, you know, shit to that fucking effect. Where, you know, oh, can they assemble? Do they have, is there freedom of the press for people who absolutely vehemently hate your revolution? Do they have the right to organize political parties and fucking paramilitaries to destabilize your fledgling state? It's so fucking stupid. But yeah, whatever.
Don't punch them. You can't throw milkshakes at them.
Oh my god, fuck. It's like, you only build sympathy for them. Oh yeah, you know, fucking oh, Jesus Christ. Fuck. Because, you know, everybody remembers when Hitler shot himself, everybody felt like, oh no, poor boy. His mom didn't hug him. What a fucking... It's so stupid, I swear. But by the way, of course, whenever there was fascist takeover in any country, whether it be in Latin America or the various European forms, the liberals have said, you know, civilized and educated and organized Western societies, they never really cared too much. They declared this or that, and you know, it's a fucking worrying development. You know, the fucking stupid newspeak. But at the end of the day, nothing, no concrete action or even statement. Compare that with socialist nations, in which all of a sudden, demonized to the ground, and blah blah. And of course, again, blah blah. Like, just to fucking TLDR this, because I'm rambling a bit about this. The reason that liberals do this is because liberals, at the end of the day, serve the same class interests as fascists. They both serve the class interests of the bourgeoisie. They serve the interests of the ruling class for protection of capital, maintenance of capital, and the prevention of working people, the working class, of achieving state power. That's about it.
Yeah, well said. Now I'm thinking of if the internet had been around during World War II, you know that you'd see the liberals doing the thing they're doing with Putin now, or like Adolf Hitler. If I was your mother, I would have hugged you and said your art was good.
Oh my god. Jeez, what makes somebody fucking... Do you think Putin saw that? Do you think he actually viewed it and like even? Do you think it even if he even did see it? Would you think he would just look? He'd be like, "What the fuck is this? What is wrong with what is wrong with white people or liberals?" I guess in this case.
And Putin, if I was your mother, and he's looking 10 seconds, and then you hear a slow zip. Pants fall down to the ground.
Oh my god! Okay, stop.
Yes, mommy, keep talking to me, mommy.
Oh fuck!
Yeah, that took a perverted turn. Really I'm sorry for the.
It's okay. Do we even know who? I've never heard of this person before ever. Is she an actress? What is she?
No idea.
I think she's an actress. I didn't watch beyond the first like 2 seconds.
Yeah,
so
a professional mommy.
But I saw a couple. Yeah, I saw a couple articles and I skimmed it. It was like, yeah, actress, and she's doubled down on it now that people are making fun of her. So.
I remember when I first saw it, I thought it was satire. I thought it was supposed to be like a joke of liberal impotence.
I am
exactly.
I am an unironic Freud fan. Yes, he said some stupid things, but you get the point. But just the idea that one would govern a state in a particular way because of how his mother interacted with him. And we're talking about like a 70-year-old is absolute liberal gold to me. It is like you actually have to think of that. You have to like sit down and be like, okay, why is this geopolitical situation now happening? Why is this conflict arisen? And you know so little about the world except the problems that you have with your dad. But you're a girl, so he's a boy. No way can he have problems with his dad. Okay, so mommy issues. Let's do a video on mommy issues and post it publicly on a platform. Absolutely incredible. She was so pissed about the situation.
She had the idea. Yeah. She had the idea and made it and posted it and was proud of it. It was like, oh, this is gonna get some
edited it, fucking wrote it. That's all written. It's a poem. Wrote that thing.
Wow, what a fucking the talent. But I was gonna say about the fucking Freudian shit. I remember in psych, psychology and psych, which were two different topics when we studied them in med school. But I remember they unironically had us read about the stupid, the anal stage of development and penile stage, and I'm like, this is not science. What the fuck is this? Okay. Oh, apologies to any psychoanalysts listening, but I'm sorry.
Oh, come on,
okay, fucking.
You should use it as a lens of like the philosophical analysis, not a science or whatever. But yes,
yeah. It's interesting. So, it's interesting. But if anybody came up to me and was like, I'm sorry, yeah.
I was gonna say I'm not familiar with this. Please tell me what age is the butthole age.
I don't remember now. It's all of it is like in the first 6 years of development.
Oh god.
Oof. Oh fuck. But yeah, no, I remember it was the first couple of age, and they had several of them. One of them, I remember, the one that stood out to me was little anal stage of development, and I'm like, why? You could have named this anything else, right? Oh fuck. But I was gonna say, by the way, talking about this also further, this shit of like, oh, if I was your mother and if I actually had worked, I'm telling you guys, she didn't work because she doesn't have enough, liberal internet clout. But what's his name? John Oliver, is that the guy with the show?
Yeah,
the British guy. Yeah. If John Oliver did a what's it called, Fortnite dance, sent a 10-second Fortnite dance and saying ratio plus L plus no bitches plus whatever else, and he said that to fucking put the ICBMs would have dismantled themselves. Okay, please. All right, Putin would have fell over foaming at the mouth at his desk. Oh fuck. Do you know something I hate about modern fucking liberal bullshit is that every like non-related thing, some weird corporate fucking entity that sells weed cupcakes for fucking dogs or some shit, they have to be like, oh, in these trying times we condemn the Russian aggression against what the fuck? Yeah. You're a dog walker. Why do you
Wendy stands fuck? With the brave people.
Right? Fuck. Oh my god. Oh jeez, like the on Pirate Bay or something. If you go on it, then there's like a big thing where it's like, oh, we stand with it. Okay, fine, whatever. But I mean, what do you have to do with like you're a pirating website to begin with? I didn't think that morals. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just moving swiftly along. There's something that I think we can just take a short detour onto. We mentioned it in an early episode, but I really want to like just meme about this a bit. Whenever the topic of fascism comes up, Nazism or fascism, as because people sometimes aren't very specific with their terms, you always get these liberals, or more usually conservative type liberals, and they could be like, oh, but fucking Hitler was a socialist, and Nazi Germany was a socialist nation, blah blah. And I personally, I don't have the energy to go through this. So JT, do you want to take this?
Yeah, so that's really common here in the States, and it's like even among people who mean well, they're like, well, Hitler was a socialist, right? It was the National Socialist Party. And you're like, okay, so the easiest way that I've found to deal with that kind of person in particular, like the not bad faith actor, is like just quote Hitler. He said, all right, our socialism has nothing to do with Marxian economics. There you go. Dust your hands, you're done. That's It doesn't come from, a lot of times, and maybe I'm being too generous here, a lot of times it doesn't come from a place of being bad faith. If it comes from Fox News or CNN, yeah, absolutely, they know what they're doing, but the average person, I genuinely, at least in the United States, I don't think that they mean to muddy the waters. I think they're just genuinely misinformed.
Yeah, I think so as well for the absolute majority. I mean, the majority of people doesn't know where Australia is or where Asia is or how gravity works, or at the very least, I don't know, that bananas are a bit radioactive. But you're expecting them to know what fucking socialism and Nazism and fascism and what was Adolf, etc., etc. Sometimes we really are in a sort of tiny little echo chamber, like some self-crit, and we think like, oh my God, these things are so goddamn obvious. How can you think that Hitlerites are the same as the Soviets that they're fighting? Well, for a lot of people, they just don't give a fuck. They're waiting for the new,
Right.
Nicki album to drop. By the way, I fucking love Nicki. I'm not no shit against Nicki, and that's it. They're just enjoying their fucking life. They're eating their hot dogs. They, to them, scary authoritarian word 1 equals scary authoritarian word 2, and it's it is what it is, bruv. And but that's what organizations such as ours kind of are supposed to be about, quote unquote, deprogramming. And it takes one step at a time, and be patient with your loved ones when they are giving you complete drivel, and eventually you're gonna change their mind. Because let's be honest, most of you, when you were much smaller, because of I don't know, usually your school system had equally, if not even more, cringe takes. But where the problem lies is when you hear it from so-called professional journalists, or from political analysts, or people usually with deep pockets linked to NGO 1 or 2 or Think Tank 1 or 7. That's when you can see that while certain people are trying to deprogram the majority, be it on topics of fascism, capitalism, etc., a lot are there with their literal whole life profession being to program people into a very specific set of thinking. And it used to be that we think that this also ties into the fascist rhetoric, that we need to, that the buildup of a fascist state, or like a bourgeois state trying to protect itself, it has to make people believe in the principles and ideals of that specific state. And that did work for a lot of the older generation. America is the freest place in the world. Our wars are actually delivering freedom to people, etc., etc. But it's really transformed into a kind of situation where both the people at the top understood that we don't have to bother with creating this. We can just share massive disinformation instead of building up a cultural, push and identity and so on. So very often it is misinformation that is the new ideology, and not necessarily specific sets of principles that somebody follows or doesn't follow. Because yes, we're too lazy even to have principles, even when they're backwards. Literally too lazy to even be fascists at this point.
Yeah. And something also that about the point of, of course, have patience with when discussing and all that kind of stuff. Something that doesn't help is that liberals themselves, and I mean the fucking state approved liberals, have not done a good job, or they've intentionally done a job of trying to muddle the water on this by doing the fucking both sides totalitarianism, that fucking garbage, by trying to always link fascism and communism or socialism. Whenever they speak of Hitler, they always say, oh, Hitler or Stalin. When they talk about Nazi Germany, they're like, or the Soviet Union. I know in many like history and like high school teaching around the world, they always do a module, and it's basically all the comparisons between, like, similarities between fascism and communism, and it's the usual fucking, you know, like communism when the government does stuff, basically, and they're like, oh well, in fascism the government does stuff too, so see, fucking right. And the very fact that the concept of totalitarianism, which you by the way see only echoed in what's it called, liberal work, because it has no explanatory power. It's entirely a term used and invented to link socialism and fascism. That's its only purpose, because otherwise the two ideologies have absolutely nothing in fucking common. But they like to bring some strange idea of, oh yeah, but the government was, you know, had more fucking civil restrictions, or had more a certain office had more executive power, as if they're pretending that France or the UK or Britain or the US at the same time frame didn't have those exact same things, right? It's so stupid.
And also, it's just like, if you're taught this in school, and then like, okay, you raise your hand, why, if that's true, if they're the same, why do they hate each other so much? Why does neither claim the other as part of their movement? Why are they always trying to kill each other? Why are the fascists, like these, you know, supposedly socialist people, always so quick to go and exterminate communists? Like, it doesn't take much thought to get through it.
It's socialist infighting, you see. I'm very smart. I'm very smart. Pee pee poo poo.
All of World War II was just socialist infighting. Don't you guys know?
Factional dispute. Fucking
the precursor to Twitter drama.
Hitler was like, maybe Trotsky was right, and Stalin was like, oh, go fuck yourself. And but Poland was like, oh, I like Mao more than all of you guys, so that's why they agreed on fucking up Poland. But then after that, had to deal with you know. The Trotsky question. We have a ton of listeners at this point, so there's probably like a 0.1% chance of one of our listeners right now hearing me say this and actually Googling, did Stalin attack Hitler over Trotsky? That would be absolute gold. And it probably just happened. As you are listening, and if it's not you doing it, somebody in some godforsaken corner of this planet is doing this right now. Just to explain just how downtrodden we all are. I mean, sorry for the doomer pill, but we are.
Please, okay. The actual historical fact is that Stalin ratioed Hitler, and that was the entire that's the reason the war started. Okay,
that's right. That's why he killed himself.
Exactly. Yeah, he got ratioed. All right. He told him he was like he depicted him as the soy was a soy Wojak, and every time he would reply, he would get another ratio, and then he couldn't put up with it anymore. So he was like, you know what, death is a preferable alternative.
Stalin's just sending memes like no Lebensraum.
That's so fucking. Oh fuck!
And then the war ends, and you know the quote tweet where he ratioed Hitler. I don't know. FDR quote tweets him and says no genes, and the Cold War begins.
Oh man, it was all a Twitter. It was all Twitter beef. They should have collabed. They should have collabed. Squash the beef. I'm so fucking stupid.
I mean, we're joking, but when you look at how the current, Ukraine-Russia war is being covered online, we're not even kidding. Like, it's genuinely almost there. Now look, he owned this guy. Oh, but then they owned him. But I will ratio you with this video of these stats. Oh no, but my stats are more correct. Oh, but look at this picture of this family with no legs. Haha, I'm more right than you. But look at this, my family of this other nationality with no legs. Ooh, ratio, motherfucker. Like, unironically, it's fucking disgusting. It's war profiteering, and that's why. Okay, I don't want to go into rants. And that is liberalism, like rearing its little fucking fascist tendencies, because now they have this fucking little enemy that they can all unite against.
It's really stupid. I was just gonna say this as a silly side note. Did you guys see this was retweeted by an official like Ukrainian government account, which was like, oh, the ghost of Kiev is fucking like destroying, like, oh, he's fighting back against Russia. For those who are unaware, if you're listening way in the future and you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, the ghost of Kiev during this Russian-Ukrainian war was it's a fictional, this guy doesn't exist, but it was some like air pilot in his fucking, I don't know, MiG-29 or something, his 40-year-old MiG-29. Right, and somehow he's been shooting down like Russian jets. He doesn't exist, but they were using like Arma footage, like the video game, with like a mod, like a realistic mod or something, and they were making they made like footage of like shooting down jets, and they're like, oh, the fucking ghost of Kiev strikes again. And I'm like, in the age of the fucking internet, people will know. Why are you doing this? Like,
but then they didn't. Then they didn't. A tweet about a woman with a jar of pickles destroying a Russian drone has 150,000 likes.
I haven't
These
seen
people
this.
not know what a drone is? Like, you can't yeet a pickle jar that far that fast.
But no, it's incredible.
You
Even if
underestimate
it happened, it's just we all just collectively decided to like knee jerk to absolutely everything. Like 24/7, 27, and to consume it as if it's literally a movie or show that we don't have access to yet on Netflix. But like the Russians and the Ukrainians, because the show is playing in their on their territory, they keep tweeting out like what just happened in this new Marvel film, and we're all like retweeting and reacting depending on if we like the Avengers or like Loki more, you know. And it's and you guys' decision who in this case is Loki and who is the Avengers. You get my drift. But yeah, it's.
Oh, I didn't like this arc. I didn't like it. The story progression wasn't very well. The writer should have spent a bit more time on this one.
I told you they don't have copyrights to the Ghost of Kiev. Like he is from another Marvel universe. Okay.
Even the New York Times is admitting that was propaganda. At this point, they put out an article saying like.
The official Kiev, propaganda rag of the United
While
States.
While questionable veracity was important to the morale. It's like, Jesus, that's about as clear as it gets.
Fuck yeah, it's. Yeah. I think the very worst thing to happen to the 21st century is this live reporting of you know, of conflict, right? Fucking hell, everybody.
The 24-hour news cycle in general was disastrous for humanity.
Yeah, honestly, Jesus Christ. Look, it's the industrial revolution. Okay, industrial revolution has consequences.
Okay, all right. You know what? Farming was where we went wrong.
Oh fuck! All right. Let's bring it back a bit.
Return.
This is what they took away from you, white man. It's like 3 strands of wheat. Oh, by the way, can you just please explain to me something, right? JT, why is it, and you see this mostly with the American type online fascist people, they make these stupid compilations of things, right? And it's like a short clip of Nazi soldiers, like World War II soldiers marching, right? And it's like, oh, look how nice and fucking ordered they are. And then like a field of wheat or something, and then some woman in like fucking pigtails, right? And I'm like, okay, first of all, a woman's never touched you. Second of all, you've never done any sort of agricultural labor to speak of. I don't think you've ever seen wheat. Right? The only wheat you've seen is whatever fucking hyper-processed hash brown. Do they put wheat in hash browns? I don't know what a fucking hash brown is.
I have no idea. I'm sure it's
I don't think it's legally
They are delicious, though.
I don't think, because it's all fucking oil. It's all fat. No wonder. It's the salt and fat. Don't you guys have like deep fried butter or something?
Oh yeah, you go to the state fair, you get deep fried butter, you can get deep fried ice cream. Not sure how that works. Deep fried Oreos, all sorts of deep fried stuff.
Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, yeah, well these types, and then they have these images. I'm like, okay, discipline, you know, like which is supposed to be represented by the fucking prim and proper, nicely uniformed fucking Nazi soldiers marching. You have no fucking discipline. You failed all of your high school fucking classes. Okay, you can't run a half a mile without being completely fucking winded. All right. Jesus, even this, even whatever. Do you play League or something? This is where your endurance lies. I don't fucking like that. All right, and then the woman thing. It's like, yeah, well, you're too scared to speak to women, and if one of them speaks to you and rejects you, then you're gonna go and shoot up the school. So I think it's best for all involved that you don't interact with women. And the agricultural thing, I also don't understand because none of them have done any agricultural labor ever. So is it just the aesthetic? Is it I think you got?
I think.
Yeah.
I think there's a threefold answer there. The first bit is, yes, the aesthetic. They like the crisp uniforms, the prim and proper marching. It's very,
Yet they've never ironed a fucking shirt
superpower-esque.
that they wore to
Exactly.
fucking school once. Yeah, like, yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah. The second bit is the wheat thing. I think it's more to do with the wheat specifically than with agriculture, because in the U.S. we
Wheat
have
is white.
yeah, no, like amber fields of grain and stuff like that. We've got several songs, like patriotic songs, that involve wheat, and so you see a lot of that imagery in American curriculum. So we kind of identify with that. Also, beer commercials have that same wheat and the same kind of pigtailed women, and the typical, right-wing American loves his beer commercials. I think that's probably part of it. But also the showing of the nice white woman, I think that's probably just part of the, we need to go back to the 1950s where this is what America was, the domestic white woman who brings you
meth.
beer kind of thing. Yeah.
She was the housewife that took fucking meth pills to fucking distract from the despair of
The
being
horrific
forced
reality. Yeah.
to stay in a cul-de-sac.
Yeah, they always spin it in their own way. That, like a few weeks ago, I heard this one guy on a local TV show say, a very harsh, fascist, openly fascist, anti-drugs guy saying, was there any drugs back in Adolf Hitler's day? And I'm looking there and like, yes, legal meth for the soldiers. What the fuck? They gave 16-year-olds meth. What the fuck are you talking about? But the point is, they always spin it in their own direction and into their own little sub-brand of whatever, they feel like fascism is. And so is it the white woman who will birth him 17 kids, or is it the femboy? Like you can go either way. As long as you get enough people around you to stop looking at fucking capital accumulation, you're good.
By the way, the drug point for anybody interested, a very nice book on that is Blitzed, Blitzed, where it goes, not only talks about general usage in the army and society, but also talks about leadership, Nazi leadership, and the drugs they used. Very, very interesting book.
That's a great title.
Yeah, it's a very good book because it tells you just how fucking hopped up they were. Like, they love to be like, oh, degenerates, that's their word, right? Like, oh, the fucking degenerates, blah, blah, blah. Well, they're the ones who are always fucking, high. And their soldiers, don't even get me started about that. The offensive into France was like, they had literally, like you said, like fucking 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds, and they're hopped up on fucking meth for 48 hours straight. That's how they could actually stay without sleeping to whatever. But no, fascism is about being prim and proper and, fucking good to your body and to your woman and to your fucking temple and to your nation. Meanwhile, they fucking have no respect for actual religious institutions because they destroyed anybody that was against them. They have no respect for their women because they want to restrict them in every possible way that they could. They had no respect for the nation because the quote-unquote undesirable aspects of their nation were basically excommunicated from nationhood, right? And what was the other thing? And for the body, they're all fucking hopped up on drugs. Of course.
What we said previously, like the rhetoric used to bring a fascist party to power goes out the window the second they are actually in power, because it is not a materialist ideology that is not set in principles the way, for example, Marxism is in its view of class and the eventual dissolution, etc., etc. So that's why.
What are you telling me? The search for Atlantis, the unironic search for Atlantis that the Nazis carried out. You tell me that's not based on material?
Exactly. At the end of the day, they really are. I mean, I used this in the previous episode, not the previous one, but the one that we did on January 6th. A fascist is a incredibly violent LARPer. That's it. They create their own fictional worlds and they try to sell you on them. And they get goofier and goofier the more things, start to fall apart right in front of their eyes, because they have to upkeep it in one or the other way. But what is a very important question is, why does it resonate so intensively? Why do we feel drawn to these very half-assed and easy to explain solutions to very complicated problems that would probably require a lot more effort than what the fascist is selling you on? And to me, the most important sort of tool that they use is groupthink, where they manage to mold. That's very important. They manage to mold what you consider your so-called group belonging, and then to direct it towards another group which is apparently causing you suffering. And where, for example, fascists are really successful with this, as we've seen throughout the past 200 years, Marxists seem to sometimes fail intensively. What am I talking about? Why is it so much easier to unite someone over the topic of, for example, race? Well, obviously because they kind of look different, and when they're not informed enough, they actually think they're different, versus uniting people around the idea of class. Well, ladies and gentlemen, because of the last 50, 60, 70 years of continuous, embedment of capitalism in our culture, we have genuinely turned from people who can in any way identify as working class or the ownership class or petit bourgeois or whatever, into we have forgotten that we are creators of things and literally just turned into consumers of things. We have become customers. Yes, you're working class while at work, but you forget about that. When you get out of work, that's when you're a customer. That's when you can be a piece of shit towards other working class people. Throughout the day, you can actually be bourgeois. And that is why, in my opinion, one of the thousands of ways that class identity has been completely rooted out of our spirit. While nobody dared even address up until very recently the social identities that many have, in which fascism manages to always very easily manipulate in its own direction. Capitalism directly benefits from lack of class consciousness, but it also directly benefits from more conflict between social or ethnic groups. And therefore, the deeper we get into, later and later stages of capitalism, the less class identity you will have, and the more identity you will have with other aspects, which will then, in times of crisis, be brought forward as things that cannot coexist, that it must go into, must fight for survival, like conservative values or liberal values, black versus white, etc., etc.
Not to distract from the actual meat of it, because that was all very beautifully said, but I saw a tweet the other day. It's an old tweet, but it still made me laugh. And talks about Eastern European identities nowadays. And I was like, oh, the Eastern European nationalisms is just different, very similar people fighting between each other and all hating Russia, meanwhile holding a national hero sacred that goes by the name of Volodymyr the Jew Killer. Which is like, I very badly paraphrased this, but the idea is being that, like, post Soviet dissolution, the vast majority of Eastern European countries try to revoke every part of their socialist heritage, and while looking for national symbols, modern national symbols, they couldn't really find any because all of them were usually communists. So then they look for whoever interim, when like World War II was going on, whichever guy basically had some sort of, prevalence,
exactly,
and power, and it was usually a fascist, and usually, the the funny thing is usually, they carried out pogroms, or that's not funny, it's actually horrible, but the very fact that they will build statues of these people, and like devote songs to them and name like schools and streets after them, and then like carefully try to sanitize just the, it's like, oh, he fought against fucking Soviet aggression and was a proud patriot. By the way, he killed, Jews and Slovaks, but don't tell anybody about that, like, and the Roma and stuff like that. It's I always found it very funny how they really grasp at straws for finding national characters, and they always end up being the most horrible fucking people.
Yeah, I mean, it's everywhere, not just Eastern Europe. For example, JT, I think you can confirm, in the US, where you don't like the current, liberal order and shit, and then you look back in history and you're like, oh, who was fighting against, this new degenerate US? The South. So you go like, okay, fuck, you're northern dudes. I'm a proud supporter of General X, Y, and Z. But then the same thing is with, Ivan the Jew Killer. You have Bobby the black skinner, like super fucked up motherfuckers. And it's always when you go back, because just like thankfully, usually, not always, as we've seen in the last 70 years, but usually, society progresses in certain aspects. And then when you want to find a guy from the past, it's always some insane fucking psycho, right? And it always just resonates in the hypocrisy of most modern nation building, really.
It really is funny to me, and this following of a national myth, I guess, to crystallize into it's a propelling motion or a motor for the nation. Oh, we've always been great. See, we've had such and such character. And I find this also interesting in the parallels that can be drawn with the inspiration that fascists followed. Like the Nazis were very much inspired by Manifest Destiny in the United States and the Jim Crow laws. Going, of course, to the tradition of always being anti-American on this podcast. But yeah, this is a thing that, of course, I think most Americans don't know, is that the archetype or the blueprint that the Nazis followed was the one provided by ethnic discrimination in the United States and Manifest Destiny. So the colonization of land for quote-unquote living space, Lebensraum, in the American West, across the plains all the way to California and Oregon and the entire fucking coast on the western edge of the United States. And this entire idea or this entire inspiration, let's say, has been kind of scrubbed out of history. Because I remember, especially like before I was a Marxist, and when I just read about this stuff just for general interest, I remember I never came across anything that even remotely talked about how the United States inspired fascist movements, and of course, by the way, also directly supported them materially, monetarily, with recognition and diplomatic relations, etc., only when they, began to challenge American capital did it suddenly become an issue. But the United States across the board has almost always supported fascist movements. And what I was going to say is that what I usually saw was the exact inverse, where people are trying to present the idea that, the Soviet Union somehow inspired Nazi Germany, which I find, like, not to be a fucking broken record, but really fucking... Right, there's a really stupid documentary. It's it's EU propaganda. It was made and funded by the EU, and it was presented in some official EU meeting, and it got the official EU stamp of approval. And I think it was called the Soviet Story. I think I've been meaning to do something about this for a while. Maybe one day we can do it for the podcast where we can go through it.
Oh yeah.
But basically, they tried to pretend that Marx inspired Hitler for the Holocaust because in some bad translation of Marx, they used the word Holocaust, basically. And like it's so fucking stupid. It's so... Yeah, it gets much worse, by the way. It's like, oh yeah, the Soviet prison system gave the blueprint for fucking the Nazi concentration camps. I'm like, have you forgotten what fucking... what are they called in English? The Native American enclosement areas. What are they called in the United
Reservations?
States? Reservations. Yeah, I forgot about fucking the reservations of what they used to be like. Fuck me. Or what the Canadians did. Jesus Christ.
Speaking as an American, we did not learn about the whole United States inspiring Hitler thing. We never saw the that picture, the famous picture of Madison Square Garden all decked out in Nazi memorabilia and stuff.
And George Washington, a massive
and George Washington. Yes.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's like you don't see that.
He felt right at home in that image. I think the only thing he would have been disgusted by is like, wait, you're attacking other white people? I think that's the only thing he would have been. Sorry, go on.
No, that's about it. It's just there is a huge education gap about what really happened in history and the real motivations for things and how we'd like it to be presented and how we want certain people to feel. We want them to be comfortable with their role in history and not more introspective and think like, are we the baddies in some of these instances? Because that's definitely the case.
I wonder why the U.S. doesn't teach this.
I wonder why as well. Like the two main questions that were posed to the high Nazi leadership at the time when it came to the discussion of Lebensraum were twofold. Number one, so you want to clear this whole area, like massacre all the Slavs that live there and establish a larger Germany where we can live? Is that strategically possible? Question number one. And number two, after we do this, the whole world's gonna like tell us to go fuck ourselves. We're not gonna be accepted internationally, etc., etc. And the wise men of Nazi high command took a little finger and pointed at the United States and said, did they go there? Were they people there? Yes. Did they clean them all out? Yes. Did they establish their own state there? Yes. Was it internationally recognized afterwards? Yes. Did they manage to spin the genocide of all of those motherfuckers in the past into something like, oh, it just had to happen. Oh, it was bad. Oh, we're sorry. But, you know, we are now here. This is America. Go fuck yourself. Was that successful? Yes. Why can't we do it in the middle of Europe? Yes, we fucking can. That is at the end of the day the crux of it, how it inspires it, because it literally showed to them that it is 100% possible, that you can use the tactics of complete and utter annihilation of a local population, and then after that you can grow a beautiful Third Reich right on top of it.
The only caveat I would put to that is that the United States never formally apologized for what they did to Native Americans. No reparations, no like stipend, no fucking like establishment of their own nation or self-regulating body, no sort of political autonomy, nothing. Not
Hardly
even
any
like
acknowledgement.
linguistic development. Yeah. It's just like, oh, it happened. Fucking get over it. Trail of Tears. I never heard of it.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ. I can't imagine that. That's like one of the few things that Americans will actually be taught about their history in school. And I'm just thinking it's literally called Trail of Tears because of the weeping of women who fucking... And I can't... And it's just like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, there's a little paragraph, okay? Like paragraph 1, oh, the Native Americans just moved out and then made room for the settlers. Paragraph 2, the Trail of Tears. Like, it's so fucking... Right, fuck. My God, the caravan of blood. Oh, you know, basically, like it's like that effect, right?
They had a meal together and everyone was okay.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem there is that we were taught about it very early and then move on forever. That's it. That's like third grade, we learn about Thanksgiving and the Mayflower and stuff, and then everything after that is World War II.
We won World War II. Don't look at the Soviets. By the way, Korean War, never heard of it. Vietnam War, never heard of it. Afghanistan, no.
Nobody's heard of the fucking Korean War. Nobody.
It's not taught.
Like,
it's
I think
not
globally, also Europe, nothing. We talk about Vietnam. Everybody knows about Vietnam. But no, Korea, like literally nobody, absolutely nobody. Like in my brain, before being
they literally called it the Forgotten War.
Yeah. I just thought like, boom, they were always South and North Korea. They're just, you know, idiots like us Balkan people who should all be kind of one country, but we keep dividing. They're just, you know, but the Balkans of Asia, whatever. And then you start reading and you're like, oh my fucking God. Like you just fucking,
Yeah.
How many people died? Fucking how? Like honestly, Jesus. It's like the United States casually genocided like 20% of the population. Just, you know, just a casual fucking, you know, right? And nobody talks about it. Nobody fucking... And then they wonder, it's like, oh, what? But the North Koreans, why don't they like us? I wonder. By the way, as of putting them aside, you can go to any country on Earth and ask them, hey, who do you think is currently a threat to global security? And 9 times out of 10, you're going to get the United States. Fuck you. You know, it's not like, you know, Yankee go home is not something Iraqis say, okay? That's what the fucking Latinos say, Yankee go home. All right, you guys are not really liked. I mean, the military and the government, I'm not talking about American people. Unless you're some fucking entitled fucking tourist that comes over and is like, why don't they speak American? I saw this video of I think it was an American tourist, I don't remember now, but they were in Cambodia somewhere in like the mountains or something. And there's these people and they have like, it's like a small market and they're selling tea. And this fucking American who's coming from the United States, going to a bunch of like Cambodian peasants that live in the middle of the mountains, and he's trying to like haggle. Haggle, that's the English word. Yeah, he's trying to haggle with them over the price of fucking tea when he's saving like all of like 5 US cents or something. Like it's such an insignificant amount. And I remember the old lady basically gets angry at him, starts chasing him with a stick.
Nice.
Somebody will find the fucking Twitter video. It was on Twitter. But yeah, I was like, oh God, what a fucking beautiful sight. Just fucking, oh my God. All right. I'm not gonna... I'm not gonna get. People know I'm sufficiently anti-American government, well, and military, not anti-American people. Okay, JT is here. All right, I have an American.
He hasn't driven me off yet. He hasn't chased me off with a stick.
I know, like when the people are racist, but they don't want to seem racist. They're like, but I have a black friend. Me and Kim are like, we're not anti-American. We have an American friend. Hey, we love it.
Yeah.
He puts up with our abuse, but.
It's like every fascist small cell in the Balkans has like one Roma guy that they're always like, we don't fucking hate them, dude. We don't fucking look. Hey, Ivan, say something. He's like, they don't hate us. It's class. But everything that we're saying is not completely irrelevant to the topic. The lady running after the guy who's trying to haggle with a stick, because again, in order for you to, when it comes to traditional fascism, if I can call it that, which is completely based on the nation and the hatred of other nations, in order to truly hate, you need to, number one, generalize them all in one cluster and think that they all think in one particular way and that they all hate you usually and want to get something out of you. And number two, you have to sort of orientalize them as much as possible, meaning you have to show that their innate savagery is what excuses you in your total and utter brutality towards them. And yes, this comes out in the open with large fascist movements, governments, etc., etc. But it also very often comes out in, the everyday individual. Like this guy, I'm not calling this guy a fascist, but this guy going and thinking that it is absolutely okay to haggle with someone who, is fucking selling tea leaves all day, and that is absolutely everything that they're going to be making for that day, and somebody who probably in a month's worth of work makes as much as this Western individual does in, 3-4 days, if not less. You really have to have a specific view towards people who are not of your own nationality in order to behave with them in such a parasitic manner. That's on the shorter scale. Sorry if I'm blabbering out, but on the larger scale, it is always used in almost every fucking conflict on planet Earth. I believe in this one right now as well, but to kind of make it more historical or whatever, when a U.S. soldier, for example, dies in his operations in Iraq versus when 5,000 Iraqis die, the reporting is done very, very vastly differently, and this always comes as a sort of mirror that's staring right back at them, which shows them that at the end of the day, no matter how much you talk about it, you do not value others as much as members of your own society. And that is directly linked not just to racism, but to a sort of genuine sense that people that you know or that people you might know are inherently more important than the other motherfuckers. Like, does the tree really fall if there's nobody to look at it? Is an Iraqi really dead if I don't know any fucking Iraqis? But if potentially Tom from down the street dies, man, that's fucked, dude. That is fucked.
And I think a point also linked to this is one that is very it's usually forgotten, which is fascism and imperialism are intrinsically linked in one specific way, and it's that the imperialism, for example, that the United States carries out abroad is fascistic violence to its core. But just because the American people don't feel it doesn't mean that it makes it less fascistic. And when Americans do feel fascism, that's imperialism turned inwards. And that's not only Americans, whether it be Germans or Italians or whoever else. Once imperialism turns inwards onto its own population, and the sheer violence and lack of respect, not only for life, but for even quote-unquote basic civil freedoms, that in and of itself is an imposition of fascism through imperialism. It's just a thing to remember, because I've seen a few people who seem to be annoyed by the concept, the idea of, fascism is imperialism turned outwards, or imperialism when turned inwards is fascism. But they're like, oh no, but fascism, blah, 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 and then they turn highly academic all of a sudden and specific with their definitions, which just irritates me, because you're trying to minimize the suffering of third world people at the hands of U.S. imperialism by trying to define away things. It's just, it's a bit pathetic, I think. Yeah. Sorry, that's a bit of a bleak thing, but yeah, whatever. The actual conversation of fascism is actually, it's very interesting, and there's so much to talk about. Today was a mishmash of a semi-organized definition, slightly small discussion, a bit of memes and shitposting, but there's a lot more to do. Maybe we could even do case studies on individual countries. If you guys would be interested, then let us know and we could do that. Talk about what they did, how it developed, or what fascism looked like there, and its peculiarities, and then also how it went down and blah blah.
That sounds like fun.
Absolutely. Oh Jesus, I just poked my eye out with the fucking microphone. Ah man, what the absolute hell. Now my throat doesn't work, now one of my eyes doesn't work. Nah, I'm fine. I just hope the microphone is fine. Oh, can you hear my farts? I just farted a few times. I'm always the meme. So it's always kind of difficult. Man, this is so messed up because my mom listens to this podcast and make jokes about eating dicks, but whatever. Hi, mom. And it's always I'm a guy with a relatively healthy digestive tract, and now Hakim's gonna come in. He's like, oh, that's impossible. Eat my ass, Hakim. My very clean and very nicely kept ass. But I fart all the time. I fart on average at least once or twice an hour. So when we record, and the recording time is going into over 1 hour, I have to at least fart once, usually 3-4 times. And thanks to the beautiful donations over on Patreon, I could afford a very nice and fancy microphone, which catches absolutely everything which happens in the room. So very often, while the other guys are talking, I stand up, go all the way to the other side of the room in order to release gas. And then you say being a podcaster is an easy fucking job. Go fuck yourself. You try and hold your farts in for a whole fucking hour and a half, motherfucker. Jesus.
But it's just so everybody knows. On occasion, sometimes we end on depressing notes, we need to keep this somewhat fucking funny, and then we try to think of something, and this is the best we came up with.
I want to apologize to that one small strata of people that usually are the ones that have enough money to support us on Patreon, because I read all the time the exit surveys, because we get a shit ton of new patrons and a shit ton that leave because the world is on fire, so I understand them completely. But one gentleman really wrote, I really like what they talk about, but the dick jokes were getting a bit too much. And that's the reason for why they ended their patronage. And I absolutely understand. We're not for everyone. But with all due respect, eat my ass, I will be doing fart jokes and dick jokes and cock jokes and pussy jokes and asshole jokes, because that is historical dialectics.
It's a Balkan tradition. It's a Balkan tradition.
Eat my ass, or lick the balls of the KGB officers right outside of your door for even thinking that you don't like this podcast, baby. Ooh.
Anyway, we hope you enjoyed this episode of, nominally about fascism. Kind of devolved as
only
they
partially
usually do.
Evolved, not the devolved.
We love you guys.
You see,
we love you guys.
We apologize in advance to JT for having to edit this.
I don't apologize. JT is literally a fascist. Everything we talked about up until now, you see the fascist behavior towards the end. You see?
This has been the Deprogram. I'm JT.
I'm Keith.
And I'm Ugopnik.
I thought he was actually going to try.